Hello everyone, my name is Brayden, this is Airless Quill 9, and in today's video, we're going to talk about the Fiends in Pharaoh flesh, known as the Gnolls. Now the Gnolls are some of my favorite monsters in Dungeons & Dragons, so I'm very excited to talk about these creatures today. We're going to examine their 2014 stat, or 2024 stat blocks rather, and then compare them to their 2014 equivalents and talk about what changes and improvements have been made to them in the 2024 Monster Manual. So let's go ahead and get straight to it. So for you all to know, the first Gnolls arose from hyenas that fed on flesh tainted by the abyss. Their corruption and violence delighted the demon lord Yeenoghu, who encouraged their numbers and spread them across the multiverse. Ever since, Gnolls have been the cackling servants of Yeenoghu, existing to cause ruin and to feast on what remains. The first stat block that we're going to take a look at is the Gnoll Warrior. In 2014, this was called the Gnoll. So let's go ahead and get to it. So the Gnoll Warrior is a medium fiend of chaotic evil alignment. They have an armor class of 15, a +1 to initiative, 27 hit points, a speed of 30 feet. For their ability scores, they have a strength of 14, dexterity of 12, constitution of 11, intelligence of 6, wisdom of 10, and charisma of 7. For their senses, they have dark vision of 60 feet and a passive perception of 10. Languages, they know Gnoll, and they are a challenge rating 1/2, giving them 100 experience points and a proficiency bonus of +2. For their actions, they have Rend, which lets them make a melee attack roll with a +4 to hit and a reach of 5 feet. On a hit, it deals 1d6 +2 piercing damage. And Bone Bow is a ranged attack roll with a +3 to hit, a range of 150 to 600 feet, and on a hit it deals 1d10 +1 piercing damage. Finally, in the bonus action section, we have Rampage once per day. This states that immediately after dealing damage to a creature that is already bloodied, the Gnoll moves up to half its speed and it makes one rend attack. So what changes have been made since 2014? Well, first off, the Gnoll Warrior, as opposed to the Gnoll, is a fiend instead of a humanoid. So they have actually changed the creature type of all Gnolls into fiends, which I does feel thematic for the lore behind them, so I get why they've done that. They have also increased the hit points by a singular hit die. In 2014, they were 5d8. Now in 2024, they are 6d8. The Gnoll Warrior also has new attack options in its stat block. In 2014, these were Bite, Spear, and Longbow. The melee portions have been condensed into this Rend attack, and the Bone Bow is now replacing the ranged option there. So some pretty major differences there, but overall, both of these still kind of equal out what was present in 2014, at least damage wise. However, the Bone Bow does do 1 additional point of damage than the Longbow did in 2014, so there's a small damage increase for the ranged option. Finally, Rampage has actually changed quite a bit. In 2014, this activated whenever the Gnoll reduced a creature to 0 hit points with a melee attack on its turn. The Gnoll could then take a bonus action to move up to half its speed and make a bite attack. Since the bite is no longer present here, they've also kind of changed the functionality here, so this will happen seemingly a lot earlier in combat than you would think, because Rampage now occurs when the Gnoll Warrior deals damage to a creature and it is already bloodied. So this could happen about halfway earlier in a combat, potentially, depending on if the Gnolls are actually dealing quite a bit of damage to player characters, because it does require the target to be bloodied in order for this to happen. Granted, it is only a once per day use, so this is only going to happen once, but I don't feel like that's a huge thing because Rampage isn't really adding to the challenge rating of the Gnoll Warrior. This is just a special thing that it can do once per day, so I don't mind that it is a once per day usage here, because it will happen a lot earlier, but getting this off will be important. Not for the challenge rating per se, but it would be nice to get this off in combat just so you can see that the Gnoll is doing something extra, depending on how bad a combat is going for the players. Alright, so now we're going to move on to the Gnoll Pack Lord. These are medium fiends, they're chaotic evil, they have an armor class of 15, an initiative of +4, 49 hit points, a speed of 30 feet. For their modifiers, they have a strength of 16, dexterity 14, constitution of 13, intelligence 8, wisdom 11, charisma 9. Senses, they have dark vision of 60 feet, and passive perception of 10. Languages, they know Gnoll. They're a challenge rating 2 creature, giving them 450 experience points and a proficiency bonus of +2. In their action section, they have a multi-attack allowing them to make 2 attacks using Bone Whip or Bone Javelin in any combination, and they also use Incite Rampage if that is available. Finally, in the bonus action, Bone Whip is a melee attack roll with a +5 to hit and a reach of 10 feet, deals 2d4 +3 slashing damage. Bone Javelin is a ranged attack roll with a +5 to hit, a range of 30 to 120 feet, and it deals 1d8 +3 piercing damage. And Incite Rampage is on a recharge of 5 to 6. It lets the Gnoll target another creature it can see within 60 feet of itself that has the Rampage bonus action, and then the target can take a reaction to make 1 melee attack. And finally, the Pack Lord has Rampage that it can use twice per day, but when it uses Rampage, it can make 1 Bone Whip attack, as opposed to what the Gnoll Warrior could do. So, from 2014, there have been a couple changes here. First is that the creature type has changed in the stat block. The Pack Lord also is now proficient in initiative rolls. It was not before, so that is an improvement there. And there are some major changes to the multi-attack and the actions available to it. So the Pack Lord now has Bone Whip and Bone Javelin, which it can use as a part of its multi-attack. In 2014, these were the Bite, Glaive, and Longbow. So those have replaced these have replaced those options. But Incite Rampage works pretty much the same way, and then Rampage has the current improvements for the Gnoll, and it actually has 2 uses per day as opposed to the Warrior, so that's kind of neat to see. But other than that, no other major changes to the stat block. Next, we have the Gnollfang of Yeenoghu. These are medium fiends, chaotic evil alignment, to have an armor class of 14, an initiative of +4, 71 hit points, a speed of 30 feet. For their ability scores, they have a strength of 17, a dexterity of 15, a constitution of 15, an intelligence of 10, a wisdom of 11, and a charisma of 13. They're also proficient in constitution, wisdom, and charisma saving throws. For their senses, they have dark vision of 60 feet and a passive perception of 10. For languages, they know Abyssal and Gnoll. They are challenge rating 4, giving them 1100 experience points and a proficiency bonus of +2. In their actions, they have multi-attack, allowing them to make 1 bite attack and 2 bone flail attacks. Bite is a melee attack roll with a +5 to hit and a reach of 5 feet. On a hit, it deals 1d6 +3 piercing damage, +2d6 poison damage, and the target has the poison condition until the start of the Gnoll's next turn. Bone Flail, on the other hand, is a melee attack roll with a +5 to hit and a reach of 10 feet, and on a hit, it deals 1d8 +3 piercing damage. In the bonus actions, the Gnollfang of Yeenoghu also has Rampage twice per day. However, this version of Rampage allows it to make 1 bite attack when it uses this Rampage. So, from 2014, there actually are some really interesting changes here. Do note that the Gnollfang of Yeenoghu was the only Gnoll that had the Fiend creature type, so that has not changed in this version. So now they are just all Fiends across the board, so that kind of lines them up there. The Fang, though, is now proficient in initiative rolls, and their hit points have increased by 1 hit die. So in 2014, they had 10d8 hit dice, and now in 2024, they have 11d8. So their hit points have gone up from 65 to 71. The Bone Flail is a new attack option. This has replaced the Claw that the Nullfang Yunogu used to have. The Bite here has gotten some pretty interesting changes. In 2014, there used to be a saving throw attached to this, a DC 12 Constitution saving throw, or the target took 2d6 poison damage. So now that poison damage is just included in the bite itself, and it automatically gives the target the poison condition until the start of the Gnoll's next turn. So this is quite a huge buff to that bite attack. And then that Bone Flail is doing the same amount of damage as the Claw used to in 2014. However, its reach is 10 feet instead of 5 feet, and it is now dealing piercing damage instead of slashing damage. So those are really the only major changes there. And then, of course, there is that Rampage trait that has changed there, and the Fang can use that twice per day, so that's pretty cool there. Finally, we have an entirely new Gnoll stat block, and this is the Gnoll Demoniac. They are medium fiends, chaotic evil alignment. They have an armor class of 16, an initiative of +4. For hit points, they have 135. Speed, they have 30 feet. Ability scores, they have a strength of 16, dexterity of 12, constitution of 17, intelligence of 14, wisdom of 15, and charisma of 17. They are proficient in strength, constitution, wisdom, and charisma saving throws. They have a perception of +5. Senses, they have a dark vision of 60 feet and a passive perception of 15. Languages, they know abyssal, common, and Gnoll. There are challenge ratings 8 creature, giving them 3,900 experience points and a proficiency bonus of +3. In its multi-attack, the Gnoll can make 2 Abyssal Strike attacks. Abyssal Strike is a melee or ranged attack roll with a +6 to hit, a reach of 5 feet or range of 60 feet, and on a hit, it deals 5d6 +3 poison damage for an average of 20, which is quite a large amount of damage. The Gnoll Demoniac also has Hunger of Yunogu on a recharge of 5 to 6. This says that the Gnoll conjures a 30-foot cube of magical darkness originating from a point it can see within 60 feet, which lasts for 1 minute or until the Gnoll's concentration ends on it. The area is difficult terrain. Dexterity saving throw DC 14. Any creature that starts its turn in this area or enters it for the first time on a turn. Failure, 8d6 necrotic damage, and the Gnoll or a creature of a choice that it can see gains 10 temporary hit points. Success, half damage only. Hunger Yunogu is actually really cool because it kind of functions like Hunger of Hadar, functionally and mechanically. It also is really neat because the Gnoll Demoniac, since it has dark vision, it can actually see through this cube if it so wishes, because dark vision can pierce magical darkness unless that states specifically that it doesn't. So it can still see creatures in that darkness, which is quite kind of neat. But this is a really flavorful action here, and I really like it. I think it's really cool. Then in the bonus action section, the Gnoll Demoniac also has Rampage twice per day, except this version allows this Gnoll to make 1 Abyssal Strike attack when it uses it. Overall, though, this is a really cool stat block, and I like that there's a higher challenge rating Gnoll included in the 2024 Monster Manual. I feel like this kind of levels them all out, because with this higher challenge rating option, this is obviously going to be the head honcho that is leading packs of Gnolls into combat, and I do like that we had this option. But yeah, that's going to be it for Gnolls today. So thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you like Gnolls just as much as I do. If you do, let me know in the comments and we'll chat about Gnolls. Also, if you really like Gnolls and are interested in seeing them in adventures, you can check out Mr. Rex's channel on YouTube. He has a 5e adventure called Sands of Doom that has Gnolls as the big bads of the campaign. So that's a really cool book. So I would go ahead and give that a check if you have not done so already, because that's a really cool adventure and I've had a ton of fun reading it. But thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all in the next video. See you later.